Today, we're going to talk about a piece of technology that literally did the impossible. It managed to capture the human voice, turn it into invisible electricity, shoot it across huge distances, and then turn it back into sound on the other end. This is the incredible story of the telephone.
And it all starts with these simple, almost mysterious words. This wasn't some grand announcement to the world. It was just an urgent request. But these were the very first words ever spoken through a telephone, and they kicked off a revolution in how we connect with each other.
I mean, it's kind of hard for us to imagine now, but before this moment, communicating with someone far away meant waiting. You were waiting for a letter, or at best, you got a series of clicks from a telegraph operator. It was slow, it was impersonal, and there was always someone in the middle. The telephone, well, it promised something totally different. A real, direct, and immediate conversation. Just you and the other person.
So, let's jump back to the 1870s. This was an incredible age of invention. The telegraph was already a big deal, but all these inventors were in this frantic race to build something called a harmonic telegraph, a device that could send a bunch of messages at once. And that race, well, it would lead to something way, way bigger.
Okay, so this is where the story gets really dramatic. It all comes down to one single day, February 14th, 1876. Valentine's Day, believe it or not. Two different men, Alexander Graham Bell and Elisha Gray, show up at the patent office with designs for a telephone, just hours apart. Bell's lawyer got his application in first, and that little time gap secured him the patent. But trust me, the fight was just getting started.
And that right there is the million-dollar question people have been arguing about for more than a century. So who really invented it? Was it Bell, the guy who was an expert on the science of sound because he taught the deaf? Or was it Gray, who was already a well-known, established inventor? Bell got the patent for sure, but the story is a whole lot messier than that. And here's the thing, just because Bell had the patent didn't mean he had a working telephone. Not yet anyway. The actual breakthrough, the moment it finally worked, came a few weeks later. And it wasn't some flash of genius in the lab. Nope, it was an accident. Bell spilled battery acid on himself, shouted for his assistant, and that panicked cry was the first successful voice transmission in history.
Okay, so the device works. That's a huge step. But an invention like this is pretty useless if it's just one gadget in one room. The next massive challenge was figuring out how to turn this thing into a huge, sprawling network. And that meant creating a brand new kind of workforce.
The answer was the manual switchboard. And with it came a whole new career path, almost entirely for women, the telephone operator. You can think of them as the human-computer routers of their day. They had to physically plug in wires to connect every single call. The work was incredibly intense, super repetitive, and as more and more people got phones, these operators became the biggest bottleneck in the whole system.
From all this, the Bell Telephone Company grew into this massive, all-powerful monopoly people started calling Ma Bell. And for a huge chunk of the 20th century, they controlled everything. The wires, the tech, even that heavy black phone in your house that you couldn't own, you had to rent it from them. By controlling the entire system, they basically built a fortress, and new ideas couldn't get in. Telephone technology was pretty much frozen in time for decades.
But you know how it is, right? Progress doesn't always come from some fancy corporate lab. Sometimes the next big leap forward is driven by something as simple as one person's frustration. In this case, a very, very angry small-town businessman.
You're not going to believe this, but it's amazing what a personal grudge can do for innovation. This guy, Almond Stroker, was an undertaker, and he was absolutely convinced that the local telephone operator was sending his business calls to her husband, who just happened to be the rival undertaker. So, out of pure anger, he invented a machine to replace her. His automatic switch, patented in 1891, was the invention that led to the rotary dial system that pretty much everyone used for the next 70 years.
So, for a whole century, the telephone was physically tied to a wall. But a new dream was starting to take shape. And this one wasn't inspired by industry, it was inspired by science fiction. It was the dream of a phone you could carry anywhere.
And the man with that dream was an engineer at Motorola named Martin Cooper. He was watching Star Trek. He saw Captain Kirk just flip open his communicator and talk, and he had this powerful idea. Communication shouldn't be about connecting places, it should be about connecting people. So he set out to build a real-life version.
And he did it. On April 3, 1973, he stood on a street corner in New York City and made the first public cell phone call in history. And who did he call? You gotta love this part. He called his biggest rival, Joel Engel, who was the head of research at Bell Labs. It was the ultimate I told you so. A single phone call that started a global revolution.
Now, it actually took another 10 years for that first phone, the Motorola Dynatac, to even be sold to the public. And the difference between that phone and what we have now is just mind-blowing. That first one weighed over 2 pounds. It was a brick. You got 30 minutes of talk time before the battery died, and it cost the equivalent of over $11,000 in today's money. The leap from that to this has been absolutely staggering.
So, we were finally free from the cable. But the story's not over, not even close. The telephone itself was about to be completely reinvented. It was about to change from a device you just talked on into a portal to pretty much everything else.
And that reinvention arrived in 2007 with this one. Simple, incredibly bold statement from Steve Jobs. Now, the iPhone wasn't technically the very first smartphone, but it was absolutely the one that changed the entire game.
See, the genius of the iPhone was that it wasn't just a phone. It was a perfect combination of 3 devices in one beautiful package. But the real game changer, the thing that turned it into what it is today, was the App Store, which came a year later. That's what transformed it from a closed gadget into an open platform. It basically put a supercomputer in all of our pockets.
And that brings us right up to today. Think about that journey for a second. It started with an inventor's accidental cry for help. It was built by an army of telephone operators, automated by an angry undertaker, and cut free from the wall by a sci-fi fan. Now, it's a little rectangle of glass that connects us to literally all of human knowledge. The story of the telephone is really the story of our need to connect. So the big question is, where does this story go from here?